Majora's Mask by Panini's Cupcake. So, I don't know if you guys are too young to remember Game Sharks. I'm not even sure if they make them anymore. They were this cool little thing that you could plug into a game console and use it to hack the game and discover cheats. My buddy still has one for his Nintendo 64, and we still like to mess around with it sometimes. I found a used copy of Majora's Mask the other day, and realized that we'd never tried to hack it. So, I dropped $5 on the cartridge. Last night, I called up my friend, grabbed a case of beer, and went over to his house for some sweet drunken retro gaming. We were having a great time, making Link fall through floors and walk through walls and all of that good stuff. We even found a code that caused a huge number of those annoying little dogs to spawn, swamping the map and generally causing chaos. After the standard cheats got boring, we decided to run the code search on the Game Shark. Oddly, the Game Shark came up with a brand new code sequence, one we'd never seen before. Being slightly puzzled from the beer and bored with throwing infinite bombs at unsuspected enemies, we punched the code in and fired up the game. Game Sharks have a tendency to cause minor glitches, so neither of us were very surprised when the game completely skipped over the menu screen and jumped directly into the action. We were outside the snow temple, and the clock was stuck at a couple of minutes to midnight on the third day. The moon was leering at us from the sky, nearly ready to crash into the ground. Other than the frozen time, the game seemed to be functional, so I pushed forward on the control stick and sent Link off in exploration of the world as it teetered directly on the brink of apocalypse. There was a distinct lack of enemies, and strange patterns of pixels would randomly appear and disappear. Naturally, we were starting to get pretty bored since we had nothing to kill. I decided to shut the console down and try another code, but I figured I'd look up at the moon one more time. To my surprise, it was much larger than it had been before, and we realized that it was still approaching Earth despite the fact that time was stopped. It was nearly ready to crash down, so we decided to see if anything cool would happen in the endgame cutscene. Oddly enough, the cutscene never triggered. Instead, the moon just kept getting closer and closer. I could barely make out movement on it, and I realized that the spinning Majora's Mask from the menu screen was appearing on the surface in a flurry of oddly shaped pixels. The spinning mask continued to get clearer and clearer until it completely hid the moon's evil grin. Something seemed very wrong with the mask though. It seemed too well animated for an image on the Nintendo 64. The lines and details were very clear, the colours far too vivid. As the mask spun around, the eyes seemed to follow me, staring directly at me. I was hypnotized by it. I sat there, beer in one hand, controller in the other, unable to look away from the screen. Extremely disturbing images began to flash across the TV as the moon continued to approach. Everything appeared to be on fire, and quick glimpses of the poor, innocent animated characters of the town showed them dying extremely gruesome deaths. Majora's Mask completed one final rotation and stopped, staring directly at us. A gnarled hand came up, slowly pulling the mask away, and underneath was the Skull Kid. A horrible expression of agony and pain burned on his face. He opened his mouth with a sickening groan of cartridge-era video game sounds, and uttered the words that have been haunting me at night. "You lost the game." The screen went pitch black, and the Nintendo 64 shut off. Me and my friend just looked at each other, unsure of what we'd just seen. He claims that it was just an alternate ending the producers didn't use in the actual game, but the whole thing, it seemed way too paranormal to be that easily explained. Forest Eternal by Xenodeath888. Joel had never liked it here. Beth and Amy have never enjoyed this place either. I don't really understand them. I think it's beautiful here. We have a nice cozy home out here in the forest. It's lovely, secluded, quiet, and lost in time. Lost in time. That's what I love the most. From the moment we moved in, it seemed like time had frozen. For the longest time, My sisters and I wouldn't believe it. But now, we're convinced. You see, we didn't always live here. We came from a land very far away. From birth, we had ability. Magic ability. We were all raised on different elemental specialties. Joelle is very hot-headed and aggressive, perfect for fire. From a young age, her conjuring skills were incredible, and she was almost unbeatable in combat. Almost. Yet Beth saw to it that she knew her place. Beth was a fan of water and ice magic. Cool, smart and relaxed, she'd go onto the dueling grounds and take on Joelle, especially after their usual arguments. She won every time, but Joelle was stubborn and often asked for a rematch later that week, and the cycle repeated, as expected. Our people were strong, and our land, a place far away from Hyrule, had always had a deep connection with the mystic. My other sister, Amy, was a woman of wind and earth magic. She was far stronger than Joelle or Beth, and often, in her cockiness, looked to me for a challenge. Of course, she lost every time. Not that she was weak in any way really, but I, being the oldest, far stood above all of them. I was a practitioner of the dark arts, shadow magic. My late mother was not very happy, of course, but shadow magic is a deep practice, and I eventually gained everyone, and her, respect. I very quickly overtook my younger sisters in our race to master our elements, and through many duels, wins as well as losses, I was quickly the head of the family after our mother passed away. Yet, one day, a man of great evil came to our beautiful home. He brought hordes of monsters and demons. His black magic skills were far more advanced than mine, or even that of our strongest mages. His coming was the beginning of a war that raged for what felt like forever. We fought with all of our might, yet we fell. In the end, me and my sisters ran, leaving behind a smouldering homeland. I still have nightmares of the leaving. I will never forget his name. Ganondorf. All the innocents who died, all the noble magi who lost their lives. It was, and still is to this day, the darkest day of our lives. We were still young, and we didn't know where we were going. But we had to find a new and safer home. We caught wind of a forest with deep magical roots in a land far away. So we went. We passed many sights, but in the end, the only thing that mattered to us was finding our home. And find it, we did. Deep inside a hidden meadow. It was beautiful, old, and seemed safe. Safe from all harm. I swore to them I would never let any more harm come to them. We were okay here. Nothing else could hurt us. It didn't take long for us to realize that something was off. After a few years had passed, I had realized I hadn't aged at all. Neither of my sisters. Our hair hadn't grown either. Neither did our heights. What was going on? My sisters looked and searched for some magical glyph in the mansion, something freezing time. But I eventually figured out the truth. We were dead. We had died during the war. My sisters couldn't believe me for a long time. They cried and screamed, but we are eternal. And after a few months, they came to accept it. A sullen acknowledgement of a shattered past. So, here we are. Home. A temple deep in a sacred meadow, in the womb of these lost woods. We will never leave because we belong here. This is our home now. That evil man may find us someday. But until then, we will live in peace. My sisters and I are always waiting for a new dawn, when we can go home and be happy once more. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed the story. We're at the end of this one, but there are plenty more you might not have heard yet. So here are some options. My entire Gamepasta playlist, or a story that YouTube thinks you'll like from me. With all that said, I hope you leave a like, maybe a comment, And if you want to hear more, subscribe to notifications to get the latest stories as soon as they're available.